I recently went to Disneyland. It was technically summer, but preemptively Halloween town. But one of the rides I was most excited to go on was the Haunted Mansion. That exact theme of a big, creepy, unnerving house was everything I was into as a kid and still am. When I went, it was covered in Nightmare Before Christmas stuff, but still. But the Haunted Mansion I remember going on had a vaguely Victorian theme. And when you think about it, has a sort of eeriness you don't really see in the eras before it. Speaking for myself, when I visualize the Victorian times, I think of dark streets where danger could be lurking at any corner. And this might be the same for a lot of other people. How many Victorian ghost jokes have we heard? Why are ghosts always Victorian? It probably helped that during this time, one of the most exciting and chilling trends was exploring the paranormal world. Victorians couldn't get enough of ghost stories, seances, and unearthly rituals. But how did this get started? And what exactly did people do to experience the unknown? Take your candle holder and get out of bed because you heard an unexplainable noise in the dead of night. We're gonna look into the dark, eerie, supernatural world of the Victorian era. So now, let's get started. When Alexandria Victoria was crowned the Queen of England in 1837, a new era began for the nation. While the prior ruler, King George IV, was known as the Party King, Victoria represented stability, service to the people, and respectability. There was also the Second Industrial Revolution starting in 1840. There was a rapid rise of scientific discovery, production, and industrialization. The advent of electricity in particular was one of the more revolutionary and world-changing inventions. But early electricity was scary on its own. Because there was limited information on how to use it, countless hazards caused fires and electrocutions. But nonetheless, technological advancements, as well as Charles Darwin's 1859 study on the origin of the species, there was concerns that science would overtake faith. Answers of the afterlife became more uncertain. And in the US, after the Civil War, spiritualism was gaining prominence. People were fascinated with exploring the unknown. Maybe everything is not what it seems. Victorian society developed a fascination with the afterlife, leading to new practices and rituals. For instance, while this may seem insane today, people would have pictures of themselves casually sitting with their passed-away loved ones right next to them. Because early photographs required long exposure times, and with unconscious shifting, most people in Victorian photographs appeared a little blurry, but the deceased appeared unnervingly clear. But this wasn't necessarily something morbid. In the 19th century, you couldn't just casually get a picture taken. It was pretty expensive. When someone close would pass away, a post-mortem photo may be their one visual remembrance. The fascination with passing away would even affect clothing choices. After Queen Victoria's husband passed away in 1861, she went into lifelong mourning, constantly dressed in black, and wanted other widows to do the same. But the widow in black didn't have to be a lifelong commitment. Generally, it's appropriate to mourn for at least 2 years for a deceased husband, compared to the shorter 3 to 6 months to mourn deceased aunts or uncles, siblings, grandparents, and friends where the mourner received an inheritance. But this was kind of just an eerie time to live in, especially if you lived in London. In the 19th century, everywhere you went, there was fog. It was inescapable. Like, imagine walls of haze that you couldn't see through. This was a literal safety issue. The cause of this intense fog came from a mix of the River Thames and the smoke from coal fires, as well as pollution from industrialization and hydrogen fluoride, which is poisonous. Yeah, just plain scary. But staying indoors didn't help the unsettlingness either. The Industrial Revolution also sparked a new middle class. The majority of middle-class families would have servants living in the home, which alone can keep any worker on the edge. As described in A Natural History of Ghosts, 500 Years of Hunting for Proof by Roger Clark, says that these staff were in a completely foreign house, seeing things everywhere, jumping at every creak. Sometimes there would even be strange, unexplainable sightings. More people claim to have witnessed ghosts, but keep in mind that Victorian home lighting was fueled by gas lamps, and one side of carbon monoxide exposures are hallucinations. With the growing curiosity of the afterlife and the strangeness of a rapidly changing world, the Victorian era was the perfect time for the golden age of the ghost story. The 1929 book, Some Remarks on Ghosts, describes the quintessential ghost story as having malevolence and terror, the glare of evil faces, the stony grin of unearthly malice, pursuing forms in darkness, and long-drawn, distant screams. Edgar Allan Poe was known for opening the doors to the ghost story craze. The secret to his success was the contrast between everyday Victorian society, which was centered on strict moral codes and respectability, and how Poe's stories centered on the macabre, decay, and madness. As the Gothic novel was in decline, his short stories written in magazines allowed readers to explore their own repressions, such as their vulnerability, or particularly hidden fears. His first notable work is the first-person narrative, The Telltale Heart, where a man insists to the reader that he's completely sane, while describing how he deleted someone. There isn't anything directly supernatural here, but Poe explored the mind as a haunting, unsettling place. In contrast, authors like Charles Dickens incorporated supernatural elements to convey moral lessons. A Christmas Carol utilizes supernatural themes of ghosts, telling Scrooge why he needs to be a better person, especially during Christmas time. This is told by the ghosts of Christmas past and present, but the eerie tone is very prevalent with the appearance of the silent ghost of Christmas yet to come, where Scrooge will pass away alone and ignored by others because of his selfishness. And this definitely scared him straight. But this story would revolutionize how future Christmas stories will be written and introduce Christmas as a time of redemption, community, all the sorts. Another ghost story, The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, revolutionized the creepy kid trope, where this plot follows an unnamed governess who has to take care of 2 orphans at a remote estate. The kids are very well behaved, but a little too well behaved for actual kids, which makes their later outbursts even more unsettling. She later sees spirits of the long-lost valet and the former governess, believing these ghosts are corrupting the children, though it's not certain if all of this is really happening or just lived in her mind. Gothic novels would see a comeback in the 1880s, with a new scandalous edge. It was almost tradition to include a scene where a woman walks out in the middle of the night, wearing her nightdress or anything not publicly appropriate. The groundbreaking novel, Carmilla, written by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, follows Laura, who lives in a remote castle with her father. After she has dreams of a woman visiting her at night, a local carriage accident brings a mysterious woman named Carmilla into their lives. After reports of vampiric activity around town surfaces, Laura finds that Carmilla is a dangerous vampire. While this story is scary, a major theme is repressed desire. The story of fearing the other and corrupted innocence would inspire Bram Stoker's Dracula. This story also emphasizes the difference between modern Victorian society and the mystical, timeless nature of Dracula, who is another figure representing the unknown. Late 19th century Gothic literature also looked into the duality of human nature in The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, where a well-respected scientist and a violent evil man turn out to be the same person. This story criticizes the idea that people can only be 100% good or 100% bad, that the image and respectability-obsessed Victorian climate is all an illusion. What we fear isn't from any outside forces, but the darkness we all have. The fight with oneself was also portrayed in The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, where a man poses for a portrait, and after seeing it, he wishes he can remain young, while the picture ages for him. In his life of permanent youth, he literally and metaphorically destroys the lives of others, where his portrait deteriorates, showing signs of his corruption. Dorian then destroys the painting, causing his own end. This story reads as a 19th century Gothic version of the Narcissus mythology, while also critiquing the timely obsessions with reputation instead of soundness. This theme of appearances, masking deeper truths, echoed across Victorian literature, where the supernatural often symbolizes repressed fears and hidden moral decay. Sherlock Holmes writer Arthur Conan Doyle was a big supporter of spiritualism. Several books included cases of spiritualism, how the fear of the unknown can control people. The remote settings of old mansions and dark streets, as well as cases of local superstition, also incorporate Gothic themes. But the interest in the paranormal didn't only exist in fiction. People wanted to come face to face with it. For instance, there were reports that Queen Victoria had a lifelong obsession with this. In her house, the Osborne home, she had a room dedicated to spiritualness, dubbed as the Horn Room. It was furnished with antlers all over, and I can't say it was spooky as much as weird. After her husband's passing, there were rumors that she met Robert James Lee, a medium who gained fame for allegedly communicating messages from spirits. He supposedly did that thing where Prince Albert would speak through him, like in Sweet Life. That used to terrify me. But there are no confirmations that they ever met, and it's not proven that Lee even had the abilities he claimed. But one recorded medium friend of hers was one of her servants, John Brown, but again, there isn't any evidence that he was a medium. But people in this time were gaining fame for being mediums. It was quite the way to get attention, though it wouldn't be met without backlash. You could say that the innovators of the Victorian medium trend was Margaretta and Catherine Fox. It was a normal day in 1848. And because it is that year, I'm guessing they were feeling bored and wanted to start mess. They knocked all over the house, claiming that a spirit was trying to communicate with them. It became neighborhood news that their house is haunted. Whether or not more or less people wanted to come over is still a mystery. But it was suspected that a man was deleted in their house before they moved in. But after publicly demonstrating their abilities, they'd soon hold over 100 seances, at least until 1888. With an exchange of money, they revealed that their spirit communication was a hoax. But we're hearing a lot about seances. What was really going on in them? The process was simple. Participants would enter a room where the oil lamps were turned low. Everyone would sit in a circular table and hold hands. Sometimes an Ouija board or planchette would be used to communicate, or a message will be written on a piece of paper. Invisible ink and trick paper was any medium's best friend. Wink. Spirit horns, or rolled up pieces of paper, would pick up ambient noise. Haunting messages from ghosts. To really freak out the skeptics, the medium may be transfixed by spirits and would extract ectoplasm as proof, but usually this ectoplasm is made with a mix of flour and water. One seance practice was table turning, where everyone would put their hands on a table and wait for rotations. Similarly to an Ouija board, the table may lean to certain letters, communicating a ghostly message. Funny enough, this practice influenced the study of ideomotor phenomenon, where people make movements unconsciously. Like people really wanted the table to move, so they just moved themselves and didn't realize it. Peter Lamott explains in Extraordinary Beliefs, the phenomenon gets more and more impressive. There are floating tables, floating musical instruments, and at some point, you may get full-form materialization of ghosts, dressed in white. Occasionally, the apparition would get grabbed at a seance, and it was discovered that it was actually the medium. Basically, everyone in the know wanted to go to a seance at least once. There was Queen Victoria, as mentioned before, as well as First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln and Arthur Conan Doyle, who all attended plenty of seances. Plus, it was a fun thing to do at night when you're with a friend. Maybe someone on a street, giving out pamphlets or something, would say, "Come and communicate with the spirits. They might haunt you in your mirrors." And one friend would say, "That sounds like a scam." And the other friend would say, "Oh my god, a scam! Let's go!" But you didn't have to go out of your house to contact spirits or anything adjacent to that. You can do certain rituals in your own house, especially if you wanted to know about your future romantic life. Halloween romance rituals existed before the Victorian era, but it was amplified in this paranormal-obsessed time. One ritual has you at midnight on Halloween. I'm not sure what that means. You throw a single unbroken strip of an apple peel over your shoulder, which will spell out the initials of your future spouse's name. If it doesn't spell out anything, I don't know what to tell you. Or you can use a new apple, bring a candle, and brush your hair in front of the mirror at midnight on Halloween, where you'll see the face of your future husband in the mirror. But in Chinese folklore, if you do this, a ghost will possess your body. So if you try this, just be aware of that. But slightly less scary, future seeing practices was peering into a crystal ball. Marguerite Gardiner, Countess of Blessington, owned a notable crystal ball, even writing to her friend, "Perhaps you've never heard of the crystal ball." The original crystal ball was bought by Lady Blessington from an Egyptian magician and resold it at her sale. She could never understand the use of it, but others have looked deeper or with purer eyes, it is said. And now there is an optician in London who makes and sells these balls and speaks of a great demand. Though they are expensive, it's a good way to just swear you're clairvoyant. To an extent, the supernatural craze influenced the popularity of stage magic. Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin particularly was said to elevate the art of magic from lower-class entertainment to more respectful and pleasing to the wealthy. Seeing magic was a way to experience eerie uncertainness in a controlled environment. though some didn't shy away from utilizing people's fears as a marketing tactic. Magicians like Henry Keller also demonstrated the illusion of levitating others, which he copied from John Neville Maskelyne, and utilized eerie scariness in his advertising. He'd be surrounded by demons, imps, or other unsettling creatures, and all the other magicians in his time copied him. I'm guessing he was annoyed by that, but his image is now immortalized as the inspiration of the wizard from The Wizard of Oz. Keep in mind that in the magic circle, there was a fine line between portraying illusions and claiming that you're dealing with actual magic. Before Henry Keller made a name for himself, the Davenport brothers claimed to be supernaturalists. Their most famous act is where they would sit in a cabinet with their hands bound. While the doors were closed, the audience would hear music playing, people talking, and when the doors were open, they were the only ones there, and all the commotion was caused by ghosts. Allegedly. It was said that the brothers got out of the ropes and played all the music and did that stuff themselves, and quickly tied their hands back for the audience. Honestly, that alone is quite impressive, but they were exposed as frauds several times in their career, and were kind of known for being hated at one point. They were even called out by P.T. Barnum, the inventor of modern advertising, in his 1865 exposé, The Humbugs of the World. And humbug was a Victorian term for a fraud. But magic shows aren't a good way to witness ghosts anyway, because there was also the practice of spirit photography. These were images that were said to capture spirits. The reported beginner of this trend was William Mumler, who initially was a humble amateur photographer. The first spirit image was supposedly an accident, where he published a photograph of himself with a hazy image of his cousin, who passed away 12 years prior, right next to him. Inspired by this, he enjoyed a successful career as a spirit photographer/medium. He even photographed First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln with the spirit of her late husband. But in the tradition of Victorian supernaturalism, he was called out for being a fraud, even displaying spirits of people who were still alive. He was even arrested for fraud, but there wasn't any definite proof that his images were manipulated, so he was acquitted, but later stopped his spirit photography business. The situation wouldn't hinder the popularity of this type of imagery. It was flourishing in the aftermath of the American Civil War, where spouses and family members wanted to be photographed one last time with loved ones, or they just wanted to engage with something ghostly. One person may be sitting normally, with translucent ghostly images right next to them. I guess spirits are able to sneak onto 19th century photography tech. But once portable cameras became more affordable, around the 1880s, ghost images became more prevalent. Some people just had fun with it. They knew these pictures were doctored, and this was just something friends did to entertain themselves. The novelty of spirit photography continued well after the Victorian era ended, but would come to an end as photography became more advanced and spirit photographers were getting more smoke. Spirit photographer William Hope was denounced by the Scientific American as a common cheat who obtains money under false pretenses. At this point, it seemed that the excitement of engaging with spirits was beginning to fade away. For one, you may have noticed a pattern that people with so-called supernatural abilities have been called out for fraud, and when time and time again, when you saw it in the newspaper that a notable medium, spirit photographer, magician with paranormal leanings had been exposed for basically scamming, engaging with the supernatural just doesn't seem interesting anymore. But it's not like the paranormal fascination ended overnight. There was a brief resurgence in seances after the First World War, but otherwise, if people wanted to engage with fear and the unknown, there were still scary novels and early horror films. And the idea of people trying to contact ghosts and the unknown still exists. It just looks different. There was the Bloody Mary game of the 60s and 70s, creepy internet chainmail, slumber party games like light as a feather, stiff as a board, and the countless scary TikTok trends today about elevators, musical chairs, the list goes on. People will always chase the mysteries that science can't quite explain. Well, since the beginning of human history, people have believed in ghosts and attended seances. The Victorians made it accessible and utilized modern technology, like cameras, and made exploring scariness something fun. Sometimes, a part of entertainment comes from some form of not knowing what to expect. Be sure to check out my Patreon, and thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!